Hello and welcome to 7 days of Halloween. Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome to my first day of my 7 days of Halloween series. Today we're going to be playing with one of my newest stamp sets, which you might be thinking this isn't a Halloween stamp, but we're going to make some really fun playing cards using one of my favorite Halloween stamps called Monstrous. Now the technique and the design we're going to do today is great because you can create this design with many of your Halloween stamps. It doesn't just need to be the Monstrous stamp. I have some great zombie stamps that I might play with, and a little secret, you could probably even make this design with Christmas stamps. So the first thing that I did is I cut out some heavy cardstock that was 4 inches by 3 inches. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating some playing cards. Now, of course, these aren't real cards that we're going to be creating, but we are going to be using the heart, clover, spades, and diamond that are part of the Inspector stamp set. So the first thing that I did after cutting my cardstock is I took my characters and I stamped them 2 at a time. Now, in hindsight, after I created these cards, I probably would have stamped the hearts, clovers, spades, and diamonds first, because I found on some of the cards that I created, I actually stamped over the sentiment. In the end, it really wasn't a bad stamp over, because on the ones that did stamp over the sentiments, I was using red ink, and the red ink over the black ink was fine. But on some of the cards you're going to see I actually used black ink, and had I ran my black sentiment into the black ink, it probably wouldn't have worked out too well. Now, what I really liked about this design is I was able to use all 6 stamps. And ordinarily, I don't know about you, but when I get a new stamp set, I don't typically use all the stamps when I'm making a card or a design. But with this little design, creating 6 cards, I was able to use all 6 of the characters. I even used the grave that said rest in peace, R.I.P., and I used the pumpkin. So I was really happy that I was able to use all of the designs on the stamp set. Now, once I stamped all of my images, then I did get out some of my white embossing powder, and I poured some white embossing powder over my images because I did want to help set the ink. This, of course, is not necessary, but I always like to do this when I'm considering coloring, or I just want my ink to be a little bit less tacky, so that way if I do end up wiping my hand over it, or if I'm playing with these, I won't smear my ink. So sometimes I find just adding that extra embossing powder just helps to seal the ink. So once I had all of my images stamped, and again adding my embossing, I actually used clear, not white, my embossing powder over my cards, I was ready to go ahead and start stamping the hearts, diamonds, spades, and clovers. So initially when I was thinking about putting this card together, I was going to put one of each of the symbols on each corner. But then I decided I really wanted to make these look like authentic cards. Now, of course, they're not authentic cards, but I wanted them to have the same symbol on all 4 corners. So that's ultimately what I ended up doing. And I did stay with the traditional black and red colors. I did think about adding some orange or even some purple, and had I decided to add more color to these cards, that's probably the direction I would have gone. But ultimately, in the end, you're going to see that I ended up keeping my images black and white. So I wanted to keep these really traditional and really simple. So the first image that I ended up stamping with was the diamond. And the diamond was probably the easiest one to work with because I didn't have to worry about directions. If you turn the diamond upside down, it really is the same image. So all I needed to do was just move my cardstock when I was stamping my diamond image. So I left the diamond in place and I added my black ink to the image and I stamped my cardstock. And then when I was ready to move on to the next corner, I just simply moved my cardstock up, and then again just turning it the image upside down to stamp the other side. So the diamond probably was the easiest one to work with. The only thing I had to worry about when I was positioning the card to stamp the bottom was, again, the sentiment. And this was what I was speaking about. In hindsight, I probably would have stamped the diamonds first, and then I would have positioned my image to make sure I didn't stamp over the sentiment. Another option, of course, is just to not ink up the sentiment, just use the image itself. But I thought the sentiment along with the images was really cute. And again, I decided to keep it black and white, so I wanted to have the sentiment on it as well. Now this design is really great for an assembly line because, as you saw, I stamped all of the images first, and now I'm working on the diamond images. So because we are making 6 cards, you're going to have to double up on a couple of the images. So if you decided that you were going to double up on your diamonds, then what I would do is I would just keep that diamond in place and stamp another card. So kind of be a little strategic about it. If you want to use the same image, which again you're going to have to do it on 2 of the cards, make sure that you kind of stamp both of those cards at the same time, so that way you don't have to reposition your little diamond or your little heart, whatever you decide to stamp a couple of the cards with. So once I was finished stamping the diamond cards, I decided to move on to the heart. And for the heart, of course, I had to stamp that in red. And the color I decided to use for that image is Barn Door. It's one of my archival inks. And it really was a great red for my hearts. So just like I did my diamonds, I went ahead and I positioned the heart stamp on the corner of my card. And I stamped it. And then what I ended up doing, instead of moving the card, I just turned it upside down to do the other corner. So as you can see here, my hearts are going to be opposite. So when you're holding the card one way, the heart is right side up, and then if you turn the card the other way, again, it's going to still be right side up. But this makes it a little bit tricky because you are going to have to actually pick up the stamp and move it. So you're going to want to make sure that you are really careful and line up that heart image so that way it will align with the hearts you've already stamped. Really wasn't difficult, but you just want to make sure when you are working with a stamp that already has some ink, you want to be really careful. You don't want to drop the stamp on your image. You just want to be really precise and make sure when you do place your stamp down, that is the position that you want it. And then once I finished stamping the corner, I just did the same exact thing, and I just turned my card right side up this time, added a little bit more ink, and I was able to add my other heart. Now if you want to make cards that aren't the number 4, as you can see, I'm just using 4 hearts on each of my cards, 4 images. You could also stamp some of your images in the middle. So if you wanted to make a number 6 card, you would just stamp 2 more hearts rather than just keeping the 4 in the corner. But for all of my cards, I decided to just have 4 images on each corner. Now I stamped the other 4 cards off screen just to save time, because really what I wanted to focus on next was the back of the card. Now of course all of our playing cards have nice designs on the back, and this one I wanted to be authentic with a design as well. So I decided, since we are making Halloween cards, I decided to pull out my spiderweb stencil, and that's going to be the image on the back of my cards. So what I ended up doing is I'm using some of my black soot distress oxide, and I'm just adding some of that color on the back of my card. I am not necessarily putting a lot of pressure. Some of the part of the spider web is going to be lighter than others. I just wanted coverage. So I'm just being really careful and simple here, just adding some of my black soot, not pressing too hard, but just making sure I am getting coverage. And I'm going to do this with all 6 of my cards, because this is going to be the same background for all of the cards. And because I wanted to go ahead and keep the stenciling going, what I ended up doing, because again I did add some of my clear embossing powder, I had my embossing powder right next to me, and I just simply dipped the back of the card into the embossing powder, and then I put it aside, because I decided I wanted to go ahead and do all of my stenciling first, and then once I had all of my cards stenciled, then I would go ahead and bring out my heating tool to dry that embossing powder. Now the clear embossing powder that I used was actually mixed in with some clear embossing powder that had some sparkles to it. When I was adding both of those clear embossing powders together, I didn't realize that one of them had sparkles, but in the end, I've always been really happy with the results I get, because whenever I do add my clear embossing powder to any of my images, I always get that nice sparkle, which looked really great on these cards. So I was really happy with the way that the background turned on these cards. Another idea, or another reason I should say, for using your clear embossing is because there is a lot of ink on these cards. You're basically adding a lot of black soot ink to the back of these cards, and by adding the clear embossing, you're kind of heat setting the ink, and that way if you are holding these or putting these in junk journals or giving them to people, that ink isn't going to smear on you. So it's just a really nice way to set the card. And of course, what is a spider web without a spider? So I decided to go ahead and add a spider that was hanging from a spider web. And the spider that I'm using is from my mini Halloween set. It's funny, I was actually looking for the spider a few weeks ago because I wanted to add it to one of my cards, and I couldn't remember what set it was on. So now that I've realized, or I've found where my spider is, this is going to be at the front of my stamps all Halloween season. So as you can see, even though I am stamping black on black, because I was a little bit light-handed adding the black soot on some of the areas, that spider still does show up really nicely. And there is a little bit of white on his back, and I am going to make this a black widow spider, so I'll be able to add a little bit of red to it as well. Now I decided that I wanted to add just a little bit more red to the back of the card, so I decided to add a red poison label. And this poison label, again, is coming from the mini Halloween set, and it's the one where I got the spider as well. There's also a not to be taken stamp. You could also use a Happy Halloween stamp, but ultimately I decided just a red poison label would be enough, and that's what I ended up stamping and adding to all 6 of my cards. And as I did with my cards, I went ahead and stamped my poison images, and I added my clear embossing powder, and I put it aside so that way I could heat emboss all of the labels all at the same time. And then once I had all of my labels heat embossed, I went ahead and just cut it out using my scissors, and I added some glue to the back of the label to add it to my to the back of my card on my spider web. So as you can see, this was a really easy project to put together, and not only can you do it with Halloween stamps, but you could also do it with Christmas stamps as well. These little cards can make great inserts for junk journals. They can be fun little tags to put on gifts, or just something to keep as a collection. So I hope that you've enjoyed my very first project for my 7 Days of Halloween series, and I hope to see you back here tomorrow. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click on the bell so that way you're notified when my next video comes up. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again tomorrow.